We have a distinguished panel of speakers with numerous accomplishments, but due to the paucity of time, we will not be able to mention them all. Joining us today, we have Mr. K.V. Srinivasan. Mr. K.V. Srinivasan, who is the CEO of Perfectus Capital and the chair for our panel one discussion. Perfectus Capital is a non-banking finance company that provides secure financial solutions to SMEs. Mr. Srinivasan has over 3 decades of experience in the BFSI sector, having previously worked with Reliance Commercial Finance and Reliance Life Insurance. Besides being an alumnus of IIM Debates, he is also a member of ICAI, ICSI, IMC, Chamber of Commerce, and is the co-chairman for Finance Industry Development Council. I would like to call upon Mr. K. Srinivasan, sir, on the dais. Our next panel member is Mr. Chetan Bhakkar. Mr. Chetan Bhakkar is a partner at Grant Thornton India LPP. Grant Thornton is a global leading organization of independent assurance, tax and advisory firms. Mr. Bhakkar has over 12 years of experience in project management, development, consulting in project conceptualization, implementation and monitoring of various central sector schemes, programs of state and central governments, as well as multilateral agency-funded projects in the areas of agribusiness, MSME, PPP, tourism, urban and economic development. He holds a master's degree from Xavier Institute of Management and Research and a master's of public policy from St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. Please welcome Mr. Chetan Bhakkar. Our next panelist is Dr. Pramila Khilnani. Dr. Pramila Khilnani is the VP of Digital Consumer Experience at Capgemini. Capgemini is a global leader in consulting, technological services, and digital transformation. Dr. Khilnani has over 20 years of experience in leading large digital transformation programs. Previously, she had integrated new products to build practices at L&T Infotech by using new innovations based on IoT, AI, and ML. She was also responsible for driving growth across multiple product lines like Cloud, Microsoft Dynamics 365, IBM Watson, and IFS. She holds a master's degree in social work from ITSS and PhD in digital transformation. Please welcome Ms. Dr. Khilnani. Our next panelist is Mr. Hemant Kampalia. Mr. Hemant Kampalia is the founder of Globe Secure and True CSR. Globe Secure consults, designs and delivers insurance and risk management solutions to institutions, small businesses and individuals. True CSR is a web platform for contributors and implementers to manage CSR initiatives across multiple projects. Mr. Hemant has over 2 decades of diverse industry experience in audit, taxation, due diligence, corporate compliance, M&A, and debt syndication. He has been instrumental in organic growth and expansion of multiple large industrial houses and has led many successful transactions related to M&A and debt syndication for project finance. Please welcome Mr. Hemant Kampalia. Our next panelist is Mr. Mohit Soni. Mr. Mohit Soni is the director of the APAC corporate rating team at Fitch Ratings. Fitch Ratings is a global leading provider of credit ratings, commentary, and research. Mr. Soni has 13 years of diverse experience in finance and capital market related roles. Previously, he has successfully revamped the investor relations strategy at Centec Realty Limited, with the company winning Best Standout IR in Midcap 2018 by IR Society of India and Bloomberg. He was also a key contributor to Centec Rating through QIP. Mr. Soni holds a master's degree from Xavier Institute of Management and Research. Please welcome Mr. Mohit Soni.
Good evening, colleagues. Very interested in the beautiful gathering out here. And I'm quite sure, the context that Mr. Ranjanathan laid out in front of us is really a very intriguing one. There are so many changes that are happening, and if you look at the past 100 odd years, every 5 years the pace of changes that happen to this world or any country or for that matter in economy becomes faster and faster. There was a time when business cycles used to take 15 years to happen, then it became 5, now business cycles are like double that. So what it really does is that it forces us to think a lot more innovatively, be prepared for anything that can go wrong and go right. Not just for risks, but also for opportunities in every risk that we see, and for risk in every opportunity that we see. And therefore, it puts pressure on each and every one of us, whether we are looking at the world at large, or a country, or in a very micro way, or for the matter of right? So I guess when we look at let's say 2030, what are the kind of things that can happen? At a global level, obviously there is intense competition now to either become one of those plus one of China that Professor talked about. And there is a huge amount of competition, let's say, among the top few economies to outdo each other in terms of their survival, their strengths and so on and so forth. And the biggest competitor, the new kid on the block, is obviously India. Now, 3 years ago, I don't think anybody was taking it very seriously if somebody were to say that India is likely to become the third largest economy in the world. You would have been laughed out of the room, right? And today we are actually talking about a possibility of that happening in not just a very long period of time, but probably about a decade or so. Second thing is that India is a network. That's one side. The other side is that while the entire world is getting more and more subtle and all of that, what happens in one corner of the globe affects everybody else, there is also a growing reverse tendency of greater amount of protectionism. So how do the two stick together? Globalization and protectionism at the same time. And when it comes to a country like India, we are obviously the largest country right now, overtaking China in terms of population. So we have a huge problem of ensuring gainful employment for all the youth, millions and millions of youth who come to the job market every year. At the same time, we have to grow very aggressively in case we have to become the third largest economy. So therefore, this means that greater amount of automation is necessary or given. So how does this employment generation and automation actually sit with each other? Because one cancels out the other. At a micro level, as an organization, pandemic, digitalization, global issues, all of that affect us in some fashion or the other. The consumer profile is changing. What we used to do earlier, most of the entities don't make sense right now. If you look at the BSc top 30 of 1990 and the BSc top 30 list of 2022, radical difference. So how does an organization itself reinvent itself and ensure that it stays relevant and at the same time growing? So these are all very intriguing questions, which is what I propose to put to the panelists who are from various walks of life over the next 30 minutes. And I'm sure we are going to get some very interesting answers.
So I would like to say that though there is competition, there is enough amount of collaborative effort which is needed. And if we don't realize that, then we are at a loss. Because there is nothing called having an independent existence. Everything is correlated, everything is coexisting. So we all within our own structures have to see how do we collaborate, how do we do it. And second aspect is technology. Nobody can ignore. How many of you have seen GPT? Today GPT is actually going to wash away consulting arms of many. If you go to see McKinsey reports, the GPT reports are now today better than the McKinsey reports. It may wash out some of the best companies in the world. So none of you as students, as professionals, none of us are, expected to ignore technology, because if technology is going to shape up the world, I would expect everybody to spend 1 hour every week on studying what is coming new how it will impact and why it will impact. And that is how we will, as a country, live up to the expectation that we will become the first largest. I would not aim for third. I would say someday we are becoming first largest economy of the world.
Very well said, Dr. Srinani. I think definitely what your thoughts are important. Technology is not just a game changer, it's a massive disruptor as well. So depends, it's like a fire, how you use it depends on whether you gain from it or lose from it, right? So let me direct my first question to Mohit Soni, okay? Is that fine?
Yeah.
Now the reason is that, okay, let's start with, normally what happens is we look at opportunities first and then we come to risks. I'm going to reverse the thing. Now obviously as a rating agency, you are concerned with risks and risks, right? And how do you see this whole global situation of contradictory situation where there needs to be greater amount of collaboration, but at the same time there is greater amount of cooperation or competition, protectionism, and coupling. So how does it really work from a rating agency perspective? What do you see are the trends that you would expect by 2050?
Thanks, Mr. Srinivasan. I would say that I think protectionism is definitely something that, as we all know, in the last 7-8 years has really been the case, whether it was, the Brexit vote in 2016 or the US-China trade wars, or even the growing popularity that we see of nationalistic political movements, around the world in various countries. So that is definitely there, but a large-scale reversal of globalization is not something we are really seeing. Simply because I think one is that it becomes too expensive to shift back production of all goods, especially those which are sort of low margin goods. And secondly, a lot of these developed economies themselves are kind of grappling with labor issues, and labor markets are quite tight. There is great inflation and labor availability is low. So what we are seeing is, like we were discussing, a combination of some critical products being reshored in the parent country, some being reshored to friendly countries, but also interestingly we are seeing a lot of businesses are increasing their inventories to much larger levels in order to build resilience into their business model as opposed to just shift the production line that are being cheaper rate. So yeah, I think while one can say that world trade growth may sort of slow down, but I think globalization is here to stay. And as a result of that, the kind of diversification in global supply chains that we see, that will definitely present opportunities for Indian manufacturing. Along with that, I think within the country there is also a significant push to indigenous production of a lot of things just to increase self-reliance of the country. So whether it is defense production or green energy, renewable energy, there's a lot of push on manufacturing here as well. So we definitely see that manufacturing's share of GDP from around 15-16% currently will increase to something like 20% by 2030. That's almost a $700 billion opportunity, assuming an annual nominal GDP growth rate of 11-12%. And I think supplementing this is again the trend of digitization that we all talk about, right? Because India's digital economy is actually growing at 2.5 times. India's digital economy is growing at 2.5 times the pace of the overall GDP growth. And the penetration is happening across different sectors, and digital as a percentage of overall GDP was at 9% in 2019. Currently, it's expected to be in the early teens, and again increase to something like 18% by 2030. So that's another $700 billion worth of opportunity. So I think these are the broad trends that we see for sure. I mean, to sort of pinpoint the exact blueprint might be difficult to articulate, but the rising share of manufacturing and digital is definitely something that we will see.
Is digital a kind of tool which will protect countries? I thought it was more micro market oriented or micro enterprise oriented. Does it really become a big thing in the global environment in terms of what we're talking about?
It does, because I think with digital, I mean, what I spoke earlier was the positive sides of it. I think the risks that come with this digitalization are also there, which is one we need to see how the regulation will really pan out. Because, for instance, in India, while we've seen an explosion of growth on the e-commerce front, but there are also now concerns of how that affects the small traders, and there are talks of an e-commerce regulator being introduced. So that can again slow down the pace at which digitalization happens. Second could be some black swan events related to digital security, because obviously there is a tremendous amount of sensitive financial information, health related, a lot of personal information which is now available in the cloud. And if there is a black swan event where that is misused in a big way, there can be a backlash and the onset of digitalization can be slowed down. So I think there are definitely both sides to it. So it really depends, how well a country is able to maneuver these risks and still use digital for its own growth.
Well said. Now, obviously, we talked about at a very macro level, intra-country kind of relationships and stuff like that. Now we come down a little more micro to India as a country. And one of the key drivers of change that we have seen in the past 10, 12 years in India is the government itself is the biggest digital change agent. I think the kind of work that has happened in the Aadhaar and the India Stack, the JAM kind of a thing, is something which is completely unbelievable, right? Even countries as small as Singapore struggle to get to this kind of penetration and the sort of control that you have in terms of the Aadhaar kind of network. Mr. Bhakkar, you do a lot of work with the government sector per se. How do your assessment, what is your assessment in terms of how well is the country and the government really prepared for a completely ridiculously contradictory kind of scenario? And do you think India really will get there?
So thanks, Mr. Srinivasan. I just wanted to set up a story because I am an optimistic. Okay, let's look at where are we. India is around $3.5 trillion economy. We are world's fifth largest. We have close to around 522 million working population, and median age is 29 years, right? We have the third largest startup ecosystem. That's where we are, right? And now, in fact, what we are looking at by 26-27, we would be a $5 trillion economy, and maybe by 2030, a 7. But what's important from government standpoint of view, if some of you would be looking at, government is talking about an Amrit Kal. What's going to be India of 2047? That's where. What are our aims? We would be second largest economy with $32 trillion. That we would make happen. Second one is, this growth would come from where? Largely service sector, that would contribute $20 trillion. Manufacturing would stabilize at around $6 to $7 trillion, and talents would come from the middle sector, which is your primary sector. That's going to do. What are the steps and policy government is looking at? What kinds of vision they have set up? Net zero by 2070. Mission life, where we're talking about pro people, pro planet, and pro community centric approach. So where does this all put us together, right? The aim is, if we have to do that, what should the businesses be doing? And in last 5 to 7 years, and I happened to meet, Manshuji and others, and we are seeing a lot of businesses are getting into social side, social enterprises. So one of the important change that's happening, businesses cannot be built now without involving communities. You can't treat your client as just a client. You'll have to look and work with the community, and you'll have to really look in terms of sustainable development. Now, what do we do about that? Yeah. So business would seriously need to look at in terms of people with whom they are working, people for whom they are working, and the ecosystem around it. Those businesses will thrive. Professor Vedyanathan was talking about in terms of by 2030, a lot of CEOs are looking at and being into consulting, and it's just not corporates, it's the government. And I think in terms of, if we look at in terms of some of the policies, some of the aims, some of the aspirations that's been documented, it kudos to the leadership, which is kind of looking at what's going to be the vision for us. We've moved away from a 5-year plan to a 25-year plan. That's a change, right? That's a change. And now I'm just, what we at service sector and Dr. Kilani was mentioning, lot of consulting and all. Yeah, they would be, but there are certain things that are happening if you really look at in terms of what is the ecosystem driving. At Grand Thornton Bharat, what we are focusing is aligning all these purposes to shape up a more vibrant Bharat. That puts us into a place where we are able not to only sustain our business, but work towards the focus of creating impact. And I'm just in terms of trying to put up, Mr. Srinivasan, what do we have to look for? How do you, the biggest challenge would be for the businesses is to look at in terms of what purpose that you are offering, what impact that you are creating, and is that aligning with the resources that you are engaging. You will have to rescale them, you will have to look at them. And that's where, if we really look at in terms of what government is trying to do, last 24 months of COVID or whatever, we could see a clear shift in terms of, I was surprised, Father, we are having this physical gathering. Governments have moved to virtual gatherings, and we are able to conduct that efficiently. So the whole point about bringing all this point together, and businesses will have to really not only look at in terms of leveraging technologies and leveraging the other policies. Very important is how do you involve communities and build a sustainable business model. That's what policies would also support.
Very well said. Essentially, what we are, if I were to summarize what you said, it's inclusive growth, financial inclusion, employment inclusion, social inclusion, all of that has to happen. Unless and until you do that, any growth will become a non-sustainable one. Definitely you can't plan for 25, 30, 40 years from here onwards. I think that's very important. And in that entire thing, a biggest, I would say, problem that has been cracked to a very large extent is this whole issue of financial inclusion. Through Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, Mobile, that hump has been really overcome. Now it's just a question of marginally progressing on a year-on-year basis rather than trying to get to the massive Mount Everest that was there in front of you. I think you more or less climbed that. Fantastic narration from you. Thanks, Chetan. Now let me turn to a very different aspect in terms of, look, we talk about a lot of social risks and stuff like that. Now, one of the biggest issues that we have is that poor healthcare, very poor insurance penetration on the health side, especially. Life insurance is still about okay. And even the concept of a risk itself is almost alien to us. The ethos of an Indian family or Indian person is that मुझे कुछ नहीं होगा, मैं अमर हूँ. The next guy will drop dead, but nothing will happen to me. So the absence of a risk awareness itself is a massive issue, and especially the pandemic has shown us that what can really happen to a perfectly healthy guy for no fault of his. So how does that really bring in? You do a lot of work on the insurance risk side. How does that really become a kind of a safeguard? How can we use that knowledge as a safeguard to protect the population at a micro level and at enterprises at a larger level?
Good evening, everybody. The penetration of insurance in India is as low as 4 or 5%. One really needs to understand what insurance is all about. Here in India, we do not have that kind of protectionism in terms of social, which other governments in US or in Europe provide to the people out there. We are at a very low end of it. So one needs to really understand how we can go forward in this. Once you start with this, the health is protected, and after a certain age of retirement, your life is taken care of. You'll be more enthusiastic, more, you'll be able to put in more efforts in your businesses and take it forward, is what I feel. It goes along with that. Also in businesses, we pay premium, but we ask generally, what is this, इसमें से वापस कितना claim मिलेगा? It is not about that. One needs to really understand that it is a time of loss which creates a problem for a business. It leads it to a fall. To protect it from that, it brings it to the level back where you can start again. So, in terms of insurance, we have to do a lot of things. There's a lot of learnings which have to go. When we see this is a kind of a protectionism which we are giving, which will lead to globalization ultimately. This is how I put it across life. If you see in the rural area, we talk about that India is a place where 70% of the population was into the agriculture. Now, agriculture was never protected. Have you ever thought about agricultural insurance? This government for the first time came up with it, and we have given a lots and lots of claims to the farmers where climatic conditions or the crops have failed due to climatic conditions or due to other perils. And that has protected a lot of lives. You would have experienced that a lot of farmers were committing suicides. Now this has come down in a long way, it has come. So, when we talk about insurance, you need to understand that you have to go into penetration and look towards it. You will have to educate the population why you should be insured, why your life should be insured. A person who is an earning member of your family, he's a breadwinner for at least 3 or 4 people who are dependent upon him. If something happens to him, the whole family is in a suit. So one needs to take care of that. It is not only a mode or a methodology where rich people will invest into insurance policies just to take care of their investments. No. You need to take care by taking small premium policies which can cover you for a bigger amount. Which the policies kind of personal accident policies, term life policies, which help you doing that. In a way, you protect a lot of people by doing that. Corporates, they can come up with group policies for their staff, the HR. That way, you can have a better relationship with your employees. These are all the factors which go into this insurance to protect that.
The other factor is that India itself is undergoing a massive social change because we were always a very close-knit kind of a family, large family. That sort of a thing is now giving way to a nuclear family, so there is really no family protection that is coming across. You are basically left to fend off for your own. So therefore, obviously, these kind of risk management measures become very, very critical as well.
Very.
Okay. Now, we've looked at country level risks, global risks, individual risks, all of that. But what about opportunities? Now, obviously, one of the biggest changes that's been happening over the past 8-10 years with the advent of Aadhaar, specifically in India, is this whole digital thing has become a massive revolution. I mean, today, if you are not on the digital bandwagon, you are not there. You're dead. So, it also means that the expectations of the customers in terms of the service levels, in terms of whatever the companies throw at them, enterprises throw at them, people have become rather used to being pampered, right? What was pampering yesterday has become, this is mera hak tha. You know, that's the way things have really moved. So what does that really put pressure on the, what sort of ecosystem or dynamic does that create in terms of the corporate enterprises and the customers' expectations of them? You do a lot of work on the customer service experience, especially on the digital side. So what can you provide on that?
There is community levels, certain levels we need to you have picked up a thing and some camera has captured that, you are well aware of that. So we actually take the permission before we do personalization. We approach that customer and we let him know, and if he says yes, I accept and I will accept a personalized treatment, our digital, things kicks off. Otherwise, we don't kick off. Then we leave it at that. But most people we have seen around 80 to 89% in that range, people allow, most of the cases. We don't get into areas like how their patent license, all those areas are never touched. As far as customer is concerned, we are touching the customer side of it.
But would you agree that there needs to be a greater degree of legal protection as far as
So, in European EU norms, there is a protection. India is bringing those norms. I think we are yet to come up with those norms, but I think we will be there very soon. From Jan onwards, even Facebook and other social media cannot use your data in any aspect. So social media norms have already arrived, and from January 2024, they will be fully operational, and the trial runs are started coming.
Great. So, okay, now let me take a very different kind of thing. See, today, if I were to go back to Sony, climate has become a very important factor, right? We are talking about 2030, zero emission, this, that, and so many other things, right? Now, how big a role do you think climate, environment, sustainability, all of that will play in the entire global trade itself? And how does that affect India as a country?
I think great question, and I'll give you some information and some data on it. So there is this concept of the UN Principles of Responsible Investing, the UNPRI list. There were about 1,100 institutional signatories to that in FY 2012. That number increased to about 1,500 in FY 18, 1,100 to 1,500, and today it has increased to 5,000. So actually what we've seen through the COVID period and then through the Russia-Ukraine war is that these events are being seen as black swan events, and climate change is also being looked at as a similar lens, that it's something which can happen, which will have a profound impact, which will have a complex impact, but it's difficult to exactly decipher and pinpoint it. So the conversations of international institutional investors are definitely moving from, whether ESG needs to be a part of our investment framework to really, in how sophisticated a way do we incorporate ESG into our investment framework. So I think that change is definitely happening globally and for Indian companies as well. We are seeing companies, not just the larger ones, but also many mid-cap and small-cap companies becoming more aware of ESG issues and trying to incorporate ESG into their day-to-day operations. So I think that trend will definitely continue till 2030 because the pressure from the investment side is going to increase.
Yeah, in any case, I was coming to you more from a perspective of India's preparedness for a zero kind of a scenario.
Particularly around climate, just again setting up the context. If we compare at global level, the Asia, particularly Southeast Asia and all, are more vulnerable to natural hazards. And that's largely because of climate change impact. By 2030, there's going to be 1.5 degree of, temperature increase, right? Now, what's been the policy around? You have the UNDRR, you have other things. For last 20-30 years, all global agencies and corporates have just not got into ESG frameworks and all. But if you look at development agencies and all, we've been trying to put more money in terms of responding to these disasters. But for last 7-8 years, there is a conscious effort around preparedness and mitigation. So he was talking about agriculture sector and all. Now what we are trying to do, because that's where insurance has come in place in terms of to mitigate the climate change impact. every sector is working towards preparing more resilient value chains, whether it's agriculture, we're talking about developing more climate resilient crops. When it's about infrastructure, we are talking about creating more climate resilient infrastructure. Again, putting that back into a perspective from a policy angle at government or at multilateral agencies which are driving this, and that's an opportunity for businesses, is to look at whatever infra projects now that are coming up. They need to be mandatory, climate resilient. There was a workshop again last 2.5 days at Delhi set up by NDMA, which again looks at in terms of what are the policy guidelines, whether right from a building till an agri crop that's been grown, how do we put frameworks in place? And that is what we are trying to move. Ministry of Environment is coming up with a policy around carbon sequestration and carbon credits. That's where. So as a business, when we are talking about the mission life, which talks about circular economy, other things, this is where sustainable businesses would mean.
And definitely we can't afford to have Joshimats happening, right? That's very important. So obviously there is a strong need for us to push back on that, right? Now, that is as far as the governments are concerned, global leaders are concerned, climate change, all these are great things for them to talk about, or people like Greta Thunberg to talk about. But does it really concern companies? Do they really need to worry about it? If at all, what do they do about it?
So, it does concern companies as well, corporate. What are the ultimately, the companies want to sell their products. They need consumers, and any area getting affected leads to a lot of loss in terms of consumption. So one really needs to look after all these things. Plus, there are CSR needs which are coming in from the government side, wherein corporate social responsibility, as we call it, is one of the major factors, and 2% of the profit needs to be devoted to that for all the companies which make profit more than 5 crores, and there are other norms as well. I'm not going to get into the details of that at the moment. But yes, when you say that so much of an amount is going to go towards corporate social responsibility, that time the corporates are also looking towards sustainable development goals, which are 17 of them. They are looking toward the areas which they can cater to, what their products relates to. So they choose amongst the lines of SDGs, and they go towards accomplishing them and putting their CSR funds towards the projects which really help achieve those levels.
So clearly, and to go back to the point that Mr. Soni made, that investors will invest in companies which are socially responsible and are ESG compliant. So obviously, it's all a one big cycle. So, friends, having the time allotted is kind of coming to an end. So, I do hope you enjoyed the responses from our panel of experts. But to summarize in 30 seconds, yes, we are on the verge of a massive change at every level that you think of, at a family level, all the way up to the global level. It's up to us to be prepared and use the change in a positive way and survive in a positive way rather than get decimated by time, which is going to go faster and faster, right? So I stop here, and in case there are any questions from the audience, time permitting, with your permission, you can take.
Thank you.